Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So thank you for joining today's afternoon session. A few guidelines. Please feel free to type in your questions in our Q&A box. We will have a question and answer portion at the end of the panel discussion, and the audio function will be limited to just the moderator and speakers for today. We would like to thank the British Council for this panel discussion for this afternoon. And we would like to thank our education partners, Ateneo Art Gallery, Museum Foundation of the Philippines, and the Embassy of Spain to the Philippines. So for today's afternoon session, Inside the Mind of an Art Patron, launch of the report, Arts and Culture Philanthropy in the Philippines, I'd like to introduce Lai, who will be our moderator for today.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. We're going to begin our session today with some welcoming remarks from Geraldine D. Araneta, co-founder of Philippine Art Events and, of course, of Art Fair Philippines.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. We'd like to welcome you to this special session on arts and cultural philanthropy. We're going to be presenting today a report commissioned by the British Council Philippines, which included a study, interviews and surveys with 75 philanthropists around the country. So individuals, groups, and organizations. Yeah. Thank you for being here today. And thank you to British Council for partnering up with Art Fair Philippines.
Thank you, Dindin. So as mentioned, my name is Malaya del Rosario. I'm head of arts at the British Council in the Philippines, and I'll be moderating today's talk. So welcome to Art Fair Philippine Talks, Inside the Mind of an Art Patron. And we're, of course, launching the report, Arts and Culture Philanthropy in the Philippines. And we're very excited to launch this report, which we have commissioned with the goal of giving us a better understanding of the landscape of arts and culture philanthropy in the Philippines. As far as we know, this is the first report of its kind. But while the research was primarily to inform, for us to be informed about the landscape, so it can help us with programming and partnership development, we're sure that it will also be very beneficial to organizations and individuals who are looking to grow their arts and cultural programs. The report focuses on philanthropy in the arts sector, while also exploring future collaborations and exchanges with the UK and internationally. So we have a lineup of exciting speakers for today. And to start, I would like to introduce the researchers who helped us with this report, so they can give us an overview and as well as share the key findings. Going back again to Geraldine Araneta, to Dindin, she is one of the researchers of the project. So as we know, she co-founded Art Fair Philippines and also Art in the Park. She's currently the head of the Visual Arts Committee of the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, or NCCA, as well as the academic advisor and former chairperson of the Arts Management Program at the School of Design and Arts, or SDA, De La Salle College of St. Benilde, where she co-authored its 2018 BA Arts Management curriculum. So welcome back, Dindin. Hello.
Hi, Lai.
Next, we also have Alain Camiling, who pioneered Bank of the Philippine Islands Arts Education Program through BPI Foundation in 2018, managing its art collection, supervising its museums in Cebu City and Zamboanga City, and curating a workshop series. He's currently the chairperson of the Arts Management Program at the School of Design and Arts, De La Salle College of St. Benilde, where he also co-authored the 2018 BA in Arts Management curriculum along with Dindin. So I see that you have been collaborating a lot. So hello, Alain, and the floor is now yours.
Okay.
Okay, so we can start. We'll start with the report. Yeah. Hello, good afternoon. Together with my colleague Alain Camiling, we would like to present the highlights of a report commissioned by the British Council of the Philippines, Arts and Culture Philanthropy in the Philippines, Trends, Perspectives, and Opportunities. The study has 6 research objectives: to develop a long-term strategy for the sustainability of British Council's brokering and connecting work and future arts programming in the Philippines. Another research objective is to gain deeper understanding of the arts and culture philanthropy landscape in the Philippines, to understand better the short, medium-term, and long-term motivations and objectives of philanthropists as an individual, group, and organizational level, to develop a typology of funders of the different ways they are funding. And the last research objective is to identify trends and form insights through interviews and surveys. I'd like to share an executive summary of the research findings. No? One is, in the Philippines, despite millions of pesos and support from the private sector, funding for arts and culture seems insufficient. The total support given annually is also unknown. It was not part of the study to come up with that figure, that annual figure for private funding in arts and culture. Okay, so if you look at the numbers, as 73% is actually goes to support the visual arts. The majority, therefore, of philanthropists can be found are art collectors. No? The report tallies 73% of the respondents that give support to the visual arts sector, and possible reasons for this include, primarily the existence of corporations and institutions which support the sector through sponsorships, grants, and awards. And out of these, some philanthropists who participated in the surveys and interviews, 75 of the respondents have also been engaging in philanthropic initiatives and have been active for more than 10 years. 77% of the total money based on this survey is given through sponsorship to the visual arts. This possibly also explains the rise in the number of privately funded museums in Metro Manila in the past decade. And then I think important to note in this study is that philanthropy is not limited to the wealthy. There are visual artists who support artists and artisans who they collaborate with in their practice. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, well, as I mentioned earlier, there's no formal, organized, and extensive research study on philanthropic initiatives and pursuits done by the private sector in the Philippines. No? However, when Alain and I were doing research, we tried to establish the roots of philanthropy in the Philippines. And this was traced from 2 sources. During the 17th and 19th century Spanish colonial period, largely propelled by the Catholic Church's charitable giving and through the collection of alms. The funds were used to maintain school and orphanages. No? Another source is in the 1950s, where welfare organizations supported relief and institutional work during post-war. Next slide, please. What we also attempted to do for this study is to create a non-exhaustive timeline of some major philanthropic organizations and their founding years, including those with arts and culture programs. No? So I'd like to point out here the arts organizations. Well, in 1976, the Metropolitan Museum of Manila Foundation was established. In 1978, the Bank of the Philippine Islands Foundation was established. In 1979, the Metro Bank Foundation was established. Again, well, in 1995, the Museum Foundation of the Philippines was incorporated as a foundation. It was formerly, the group was formerly known as the Concerned Citizens for the National Museum, which basically lobbied to give the National Museum a permanent home. And then in 2000, the Asian Cultural Council of the Philippines Foundation was established. This report also includes an insight from the Executive Director of the Asian Cultural Council Philippines, Des Rances. In 2005, the Center for Art, New Ventures, and Sustainable Development, or CANVAS, was established. They write a lot. They have an advocacy to raise awareness for reading. And what they do is they partner up with artists to design storybooks for children. In the same year, the Yuchенko Museum was also built. In 2009, the Habi Philippine Textile Council was established to raise awareness for Philippine textile. And then in 2011, the Power Max Center Spotlight Theater was built in the Circuit, Makati. In 2012, the Mind Museum was built in BGC. In 2013, Bellis Artist Project of Jamakusar set up a foundation and a space to house heritage homes in Bataan. Okay. Well, in 2014, Fundación Sanso was established to take care of the estate of artist Juvenal Sanso. In 2016, the Bonifacio Global City Art Center was built. In 2018, outside Metro Manila, the Iloilo Museum of Contemporary Art was built. And then in 2019, the Ateneo de Manila launches Araneta, the hub for creativity and imagination. Okay, I'm trying to looking at the timeline, because we also like to point out that the Ayala Museum, we also included in this timeline, Alain, but the Ayala Museum, the Lopez Museum are here. Okay, 1961, the Filipinas Foundation, known as, this is the foundation arm of which the Ayala Museum belongs to. And then there's also the Lopez Museum. Where is that? There, the Lopez Group Foundation in 2004. No? And then further down the timeline, okay, we also have, 2003. Sorry, it's a little bit confusing. I'm just getting confused reading the dates. No? The De La Salle College of St. Benilde built the school devoted to the creative industries. No? And then further down in the timeline, 2003, what are we in? So 20, and then now in 2020, 2022 and 2022, the Ayala Group of Companies is building the Samsung Theater for the Performing Arts at Circuit. And 2023, we're all looking forward to the new home of the Lopez Memorial Museum and Library at Rockwell. Yeah, just to let you know, no, this is a exhaustive timeline of the philanthropic organizations for arts and culture. So this was just an initial study. Alain and I plan to continue working on this timeline and to update it, whenever we get new information. Now I'd like to turn you over to Alain, who will discuss the survey results of the study. Thank you.
Thank you, Din. I'd like to begin with target audiences for this study. These are program managers, business development managers from the British Council, artists, art organizations, producers, fundraisers, policymakers in the Philippines, and possibly UK-based philanthropists who would be willing to give to the Philippines. In this study, we actually employed both quantitative and qualitative. This approach actually allowed us to have an understanding of the landscape, as there were actually no initiatives before, prior to this study. As Dindin mentioned, we've had 75 respondents. These are mainly considered because of their availability, engagement in projects in the ecosystem, and its impact to diverse communities. We've also developed insights from conversations with 10 individuals, as you can see on your screen. These are individuals who belong to the senior management teams of their organizations, assuming positions and roles such as executive director, president, and many others. We've talked to them in terms of definitions, both personal and operational, motivations and strategies for giving, demographics, funding, beneficiaries, and network. We want to highlight a few findings of the study. You can see on your screen that the study revealed that 75% of the respondents have been engaging in philanthropic projects and initiatives for the past 8 to 10 years. Most of these respondents also have been supporting the visual arts sector at 73%. 37% from the 75 respondents also said that their frequency of support dependent on programs or programmatically. They usually support projects in the Philippines, as you can see on figure 4, because it's where they are currently residing. So there are 45 out of 75 respondents who mentioned that. Next, table 4 actually shows that there are majority of the respondents or the philanthropists in the study are collectors, at 63% in the based on the population, and 59% are also donors or patrons of art. Figure 5 shows us that most of the respondents are affiliated with either a foundation, a nonprofit, and a corporation, where they actually donate or where they actually work with people, in terms of doing philanthropic work. Next, it's fascinating to see that 59% of the respondents' appreciation of arts and culture actually started with their family's influence. This is followed by self-decision at 40%. In terms of reasons why they actually provide support, to make a difference, actually top the poll at 69%. And then it's followed by 68%, which tells about giving back. Philanthropy is actually not limited. I'm echoing what Dindin mentioned earlier. They're actually visual artists who support artists and artisans who collaborate with this. In this study, we've categorized private giving in the Philippines. In the context of, yep.
Hi, Alain. Sorry to disturb you, but I think there's something touching your mic. We're hearing some disturbance while you're speaking.
Let me work on that. Better, like?
Yes, we can hear you well.
All right. So based on this study, we actually come up with a conclusion that there are 4 categories of private sector giving in the Philippines. And these are first, individual giving, these are causes or advocacies with specific interest. Next is institutional giving, which is mainly or largely from corporate social responsibility arms of companies, no? Followed by community-based and corporate sponsorships. Our recommendations would include, Din, I'd like to turn over the screen to you for the first two.
We have 4 recommendations. Sorry, Alain, can you help me like enlarge the slide? Yeah, thank you. The first is for the British Council. So the British Council can begin like what we are doing today, no, to hold discussions among the 75 respondents. Hopefully, the respondents would be able to find common ground and eventually come to identify priority projects that can develop the arts and culture sector, which can eventually fund, that maybe they can fund in small groups, no? As of now, 77% of the funding goes to sponsorship of projects in the visual arts, while 48% goes to general arts and culture program development. 35% of these funds go to capital campaign and research, but at the same time, the funds also go to other non-arts causes, such as education, environment, and disaster relief. No? The British Council can enable these organizations and perhaps find organizations in the UK that can partner up with local organizations or philanthropic networks in the Philippines. Some of the things that we recommended is that perhaps they can begin like online meetings or discussions to get the process going. We also made recommendations for philanthropists. I don't know if this is something that could be explored. No, currently the national government, Congress, no, has an arts, culture, and creative industries block that is lobbying for the legislation to develop and promote and support the creative industries of the Philippines. This may also lead to refreshing or updating the fundraising mandates of the individual, institution, organizations, as they can see what is new out there in terms of arts, culture, and the creative industries. So just to get a better idea of what the community needs at the moment, and hopefully to fund the needs that can lead to directions that that can really be for the greater or common good. Now back to Alain. Yeah.
Thank you, Ian. For philanthropic networks, we recommend to develop a strong education program on philanthropy. And a possible take-off point from this is what Max Ventura's insight actually provided, no, for a strong appreciation of arts and culture, possibly starting in basic education. At the moment, there are actually no schools or institutions offering specific programs on philanthropy. But at the College of St. Benilde, the Bachelor of Performing Arts in Dance actually offer an elective on arts philanthropy, which is also an elective for the arts management program. Also, for the arts management program, strategies, funding, leadership are actually discussed in hindsight, no, or on the side with its many other courses. For organizations, collaborations and initiatives also can be a possible take-off points like Bellas Artes Projects Escuela, Museum Foundation of the Philippines initiatives, and the Metrobank Art and Design Excellence Program by the Metrobank Foundation. The coverage for this strong education program on philanthropy can range from, let's say, writing grants and proposals, fundraising strategies, and many other things. Finally, our recommendation for further research, no, is for us to develop a dynamic research culture and philanthropy, where, of course, findings are accessible. This would eventually enable appreciation, long-term plans, and best practices that can be further honed, no, among the philanthropic sector and its network. Thank you very much.
Before we end, I would like to acknowledge our colleagues who worked with us on this project. Economist Lego, who's from the Faculty of Benilde Arts Management, and research assistants Swabile Biria, Bella Abuel, and Ruthie Mendoza, who are also students of the Benilde's Arts Management program. We also worked with Ria de Borja, who edited the report. And once again, we'd like to thank Lai del Rosario, Marco Campo, and Randall Urbano of the British Council Philippines.
Hello. Hi. Thank you so much, Dindin and Alain. That was a super quick tour of the report, but we will be sharing the link to the report later on in our talk. So if you're watching and you want to read more, know more, don't worry, we'll have time. You will have the chance to read the report in more detail. So thanks so much for that presentation. We have now moved on to our panel discussion, so our speakers can share their reflections and their reactions about the report. I'd also like to personally thank all of our speakers for today for being part of the report as respondents, but also as advisors as we were preparing the report. So thank you all for your generosity and your time. And by the way, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat box for our Q&A later on. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker. We have Mercedes Lopez Vargas, who is the President and Executive Director of the Lopez Group Foundation, Inc., a hub that coordinates the corporate social responsibility initiatives of the Lopez Group towards sustainable national development. The Lopez Group of companies is one of the oldest multi-diversified conglomerates in the Philippines. Beyond the group, Ms. Vargas is a founding member of the Asia Venture Philanthropy Network Gender Platform, or AVPN, among other advocacies. Hello, Sedi. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, Lai. Happy to be here.
We'll go back to we'll go back to you later. I'll just introduce our next speaker. Next, we have Jack Charlesworth, who is Associate Director of Outset Contemporary Art Fund in the UK, managing the charity's operations since 2017. Having completed his degree in fine art from the University of Edinburgh, Jack worked in luxury hospitality and events for corporate clients, including Boots, Barclays, and Condé Nast, as well as art institutions like Nottingham Contemporary and the Royal Collection. Established in 2003, Outset is the leading international independent charity supporting innovative art projects that engage the widest possible audiences. With a presence in 9 countries, the charity has raised over £13 million worldwide in support of the creative ecosystem. Hello, Jack. Good morning.
Hello. Good morning from the UK. Good afternoon in the Philippines. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, maybe we can show Jack's face. Okay, so in the meantime, I'll introduce our next speaker, Aniceto C. Sobrepeña, President of Metrobank Foundation. After more than 22 years of uninterrupted and distinguished public service, Mr. Aniceto Chita Sobrepeña has embarked on a second career with the private sector. In 2006, he was elected President of the Metrobank Foundation, Inc., the corporate social responsibility arm of the Metrobank Group, and one of the country's biggest corporate philanthropic foundations in terms of operating budget. That's interesting. So maybe we can talk about actually what are the budgets of the organizations. Hello, Chito. Very nice to meet you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Lai.
Okay, so next is Katya Guerrero, visual artist, founder of Louis Viming, the Archive of Philippine Photography, a platform to introduce Philippine photography to a wider audience. This is an offshoot of her ongoing work at Pioneer Studios, where she manages the photography, digitization, and fine art printing department with her husband at Makulangan. Since the 90s, she has consistently worked on creative initiatives to support and promote Philippine art and culture. Hello, Katya.
Hello.
Glad you could join us. And last but not the least, we have a recording from Kim-Davies, my colleague, who's Partnership Development Director for Arts at the British Council in East Asia. She's based in Bangkok, Thailand, and leads on developing new propositions with multilateral trusts and foundations, as well as with governments. So to start off our discussion, we're going to be playing a short video from her as she shares her reflections on the report. So maybe we can play the video now.
Sorry, give us 2 seconds.
Okay, bear with us, please.
And educational opportunities. Hello, I'm Julia Kim-Davies, and I'm the Partnership Director for Southeast Asia at the British Council, and I'm based here in Bangkok. Firstly, I'd really like to apologise for not being able to attend live today. However, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to provide some comments on the report via this recorded message. So for those of you who are new to the British Council, we are the UK's international organisation for cultural relations and educational opportunities. And generally speaking, everything we do at the British Council is in partnership. By the very nature of cultural relations, we are building connections and bridges between and amongst individuals, organisations, agencies, and institutions, both big and small. And my role specifically is to cultivate partnerships and develop relationships across the region with both private and public sector. And we do this through initiating co-creating projects, programs, events, and activities that are either delivered by us or delivered by others. So the report has really helped my own understanding of private giving by providing me with the historical overview to a much more nuanced understanding behind the motivations for giving in the Philippines. And today I've selected just a few of the key findings and will provide some personal reflections and observations on those. So the first key finding is related to sustainable funding sources. And as the report suggests, it appears that there is a short-termist approach to philanthropic funding for arts and culture, which is driven primarily by support coming from sponsorships for the visual arts sector. Now, I'd like just to reflect on the British Council and our approach to sustainability, which may be useful to arts organisations who are really finding it perhaps difficult to sustain themselves kind of during these really difficult times. So what we found is that it's really important that you aren't reliant on one single source of funding or income generation. So is your income type kind of predominantly coming from grants or from earned income? And really take the time to analyze the different income streams. Are they coming from a mix of individuals, institutions, and companies, for example? So in short, long-term sustainability is best achieved by a mixed portfolio of funding sources. But my second key finding I'd like to reflect on is that local philanthropy dominates. So the data in the report reflects that most countries will receive most support from local philanthropists as opposed to regional or international funders or donors. So individuals and local corporates and trusts and foundations are much more motivated to support local talents as a way to give back to their communities, their cities, or their towns. It's also important to remember that different income streams have different motivations for giving. And it's really important to bear that in mind when you're approaching them. So for example, grant makers are often distributing funds to good causes and want to fund solutions to problems, often with a clear strategy and focus. And so you need to really ensure that your project's intended outcomes kind of match their expected results. This, however, really contrasts with securing income and funds from private companies, as they often need to meet their business goals and business objectives, and that often drives their giving. So hence understanding that particular company's brand, their profile, and their target audiences are often critical to successfully securing funds, either through sponsorship or from CSR kind of marketing budgets. And perhaps my last reflection is on the role of international organisations such as the British Council. So the report mentions that support for international projects across regions are normally in the form of short-term partnerships, networks and collaborations. And I'd really like just to pick up this point and remind that when planning an international collaboration, time really must be factored into at the planning stage. It takes time to build relations, as well as time to develop and execute collaborative projects. And it takes even longer time to do this in our current uncertain world. It's also important to find strategic alignment and work towards building a collaboration based on mutual goals and mutual objectives. So in terms of the role of the British Council, as mentioned at the beginning, we are really committed to forging long-lasting relationships between artists and creative professionals from the Philippines and the UK. But in closing, I'd really like to highlight the need for philanthropists to demonstrate a longer-term commitment to the arts, as opposed to one-off contributions, as important as they are, as well as to encourage more funding to different sectors, such as the performing arts sector, the music or literature sector, really just to counterbalance the strong giving that we see to the visual arts sector in the report. What would also be good is to ensure that there are some follow-up actions to the report. It's stated that giving is often informal, it's often undocumented, it's often unstructured. So perhaps an intervention that addresses these kinds of challenges could also be highly beneficial and kind of start to see and channel more funding to the arts. Thanks to the team of researchers and writers who have produced such a useful and practical resource. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you.
You're having a nice Sunday right now. So we move on to our first live speaker, Ms. Mercedes Vargas, who will then share her reflections and reactions.
Yeah, thank you, Lai. My reflections will be via situating our foundation within the landscape of this report. I just like to express our thanks to the Philippine Art Fair and to the British Council for this very much needed investigation into arts and culture philanthropy. The report was truly rich and enlightening for us, as it not only gives us insights and motivations into the philanthropic practices behind some of the stronger programs being offered, but also provides a useful and pragmatic reference for practitioners like ourselves to be able to inform our programs. One outcome that we found very useful is a table reflecting the landscape of investments in arts and culture. At Lopez, understanding this landscape of both the private and public sector initiatives is critical as we approach our group-wide philanthropy strategically. Very similar to Metrobank, our philanthropic practice has evolved since our beginnings in the 1950s. What began as charity and very personal advocacies has become institutionalized largely through our corporate structure for purposes of long-term sustainability and maximizing impact. For instance, the museum and library, my grandfather's passion project, was born out of post-war nationalist sentiments and the loss of much of our cultural materials. Both my grandfather and my father felt that it was important to offer Filipinos a sense of historical continuity. They were both avid historians that believed that an understanding of our past could shape our future, deepen our sense of identity, and foster national pride and deeper consciousness. The museum and library opened in 1960, and the foundation was later established to manage it. After a couple of decades, it became a member of the overarching Lopez Group Foundation, which was set up in 2004 to coordinate 18 CSR divisions and 10 foundations that are all part of the Lopez Group. As we approach philanthropy, we like to look at the bigger picture. What then is the role of arts within the broader pathway of national development? How can we at Lopez best leverage its resources to maximize impact? As most of the interviewees pointed out, This is not limited to monetary, but includes skills, facilities, networks, and the passion and the ability to ignite. Ultimately, our mission to be of service to the Filipino is a guiding light that aligns our corporate and philanthropic initiatives alike. Philanthropic work cannot be done alone, and that showed very strongly in the study. Collaboration and partnerships are key, both internal and external. Internal collaboration can be through the active board as shared by Habi, or by making the most of resources as shared by Bellas Artes, or in our case, through integrated collaboration within the group. We organize our members into working clusters per advocacy to be able to effect better coordination and communication towards amplifying our efforts. The Lopez Arts and Culture in particular is comprised of 7 members. The Lopez Museum and Library, a Filipiniana resource. Ang Mission, a youth orchestra program for the underprivileged youth. The ABS-CBN Sagip Pelikula, the Film and Restoration and Archive Group. The ABS Foundation and Sikat Solar, who work with indigenous communities and artisanal arts. And the OML Center for Climate Change, that works towards harnessing arts as a tool for climate literacy and resiliency. Beyond the group, we do find it essential to collaborate with both the public and private sector. On a group level, we consult NEDA to ensure alignment with the UN Sustainable Development Goals for the Philippines. And on a foundation level for the arts, we often work with the academe and public agencies such as DepEd, DTI, and NCCA, of course. Another point of interest to highlight is the importance of public access as expressed by Museum Foundation and Canvas. A critical component to artistic, cultural, and literary works is the experience of it, the engagement, social connection, and dialogue that they provoke across an expanse of time. At Lopez, a large part of our efforts is in stewardship and conservation in the hopes that future generations will always have access to our heritage. The ABS-CBN Film Archives, with its extensive collection of Philippine film collections, maintains climatic storage facilities and converts and restores the films in digital format for easy public access. The museum and library does the same and houses the Roberto M. Lopez Conservation Center, a scientific arm tasked to study, restore, and preserve cultural material with particular specialization in the treatment of paintings, books, and works on paper. When considering access, I share in the sentiments of Canvas. It is not just about the numbers. It's about the quality and depth of engagement in that one potentially transformative experience. Our youth orchestra group, for example, has a set number of placements for us to be able to offer high quality tutelage and strong mentorship. Meanwhile, the library's rare collection is primarily patronized by students, professors, writers, and leading thinkers that are able to deepen and in turn share the research with larger audiences. Philanthropy in the arts then requires patient capital and long-term vision and commitment. One final aspect in the report that was of note to me was the lower support for artisans. Perhaps this was in particular given this particular respondent universe. In the past years, however, I think there has been great momentum in supporting local artisans with integrated sustainability strategies, largely through economic models and social enterprises. I'm wondering if all of this was captured in this report. One example is a personal passion project founded with 4 other like-minded women, the Stilo Artefina Foundation, a nonprofit that was founded with the vision to contribute to the sustainability of Philippine artistry, artisanry, by fostering pride and consciousness towards Filipino creativity and heritage. We at Artefina foster and bring together about 100 social enterprises, providing a market platform for SMEs in a way that also galvanizes value, participation, elevation, and development. The arts investment in this case is designed to be driven by the consumer as an outcome of a philanthropic vision. To wrap up, studies such as these are so important important in capturing cultural initiatives and understanding the meaning and motivation of philanthropy towards collaboration and amplifying collective efforts for greater and long-term impact. I strongly believe in the power, the soft power of the arts to be a transformative tool towards social development and quality of life. And these begin with a fierce passion, a strength of purpose, and depth of commitment. I am happy to be in this space where advocacy, business, and passion intersect and converge. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sadie, for that. It was really great to see an overview of all your philanthropic work, different sectors focusing on different causes sometimes, but always using the power of the arts to elevate these causes. And also the fact that you support creative social enterprises where you give seed funding in the hopes that it will spur entrepreneurship. So I think that's really interesting. We'll go back to that later. I'm sure other people have questions. So if you have any, please just put them in the chat box. Our next reactor responder panelist is Jack from Outset, Jack Charlesworth. Hi, Jack. Welcome back.
Hi. Hello. I quite like the term reactor responder. we'll go with that. So yes, I'm the Associate Director of Outset Contemporary Art Fund. We've raised over 40 million across the last nearly 20 years. And I suppose the term reactor is actually quite interesting because it is very reactionary to where we think funding is most needed. It's entirely a private fund, so individuals and patrons come together and created a model whereby essentially they pool their donations and think about how they can have the greatest impact. And I see my role kind of leading the team as really helping patrons go on that journey annually to decide how they can have the greatest impact in their decision making. Very much research led. We have a model called the Outset Partners, which is where individuals come in and essentially have a stake in their funds. So we do an open call, invite applications to be a part of this journey, and then we facilitate that journey for the patrons through research, through understanding where funding is most vitally needed. We do have a presence in 9 countries at the moment. That's where we kind of physically have offices, but we are funding projects all around the world. And the way we've kind of expanded, it was originally in the UK, but then patrons realized that actually this model, this kind of collective independent way of working it could really suit a model in other countries. And then so we expanded through to Germany, and now we have a presence in like Estonia, Israel. And what's quite unique about it is it's a franchise. So very much we offer our model and our resources and help champion various colleagues to launch and develop their own kind of circle of patrons and funders. But it's kind of also being aware culturally the differences and the nuances in how the model and the fundraising methods might work. So we don't currently have a chapter in the Philippines, for example, but we certainly have energy. Individuals that are wanting to support. One of our partners, Mercedes Zobel, gives very generously through the UK and is championing incredible projects across the Philippines, and I'm sure many of you know. But we're also looking at exchange. So we have a residency in the UK, also supporting Gasworks through their Filipino residency. We currently have Leroy New staying with us for their Somerset House Commission. And for us, I think what's been incredibly interesting out of this research is it's a starting point for us to really talk about how we could have maybe a more permanent base in the Philippines. I would really recommend just kind of moving on to my reflections. I really think the individual testimonies are truly, like, I would really recommend people really take the time to go through this, because there's some really lovely feedback, and you really get a sense of the energy of what some real cultural leaders are doing right now. And I think the key takeaway is, as has been previously mentioned, is partnerships, and that working together that is really going to drive further conversation. I would love to continue. I know that the connection with UK patrons is mentioned. I'd love that this report becomes a real starting point for discussion. I hope even this talk today, like, we can continue this discussion between us as kind of a mini network, because there's quite a lot, there's clearly energy in the UK for an exchange. But I'd be really interested in seeing also like where the funding is coming from. For example, like, you know, is a lot of the grant giving going to be coming from, for example, the UK and USA? And if so, how are we facilitating that in terms of organizations on the ground in the Philippines? And you know, who are the decision makers? We could perhaps pool and find the resources, but then how is that executed? There's, I think it's Teresa Rancis, and in her feedback kind of mentions, you know, the Asian Cultural Council, the Rockefellers are giving generously. And so there's clearly an energy to support the Philippines, but then surely there must also be some reasoning to how we can support and create the connection when you're not necessarily in the Philippines at the time. I know only 1% of people mention that they give for tax reasons, but I mean, it's a really big incentive in the USA. You know, if your funds are coming from the US, I think perhaps respondents weren't as quick to say that that's a priority for them, but clearly there's a big portfolio of grant giving happening in Americas, and maybe that's creating those partnerships and exchanges is actually important to foster from afar. But they're just kind of my initial reactions, and I'm sure we can go into them more once everyone said hello.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jack. That's really interesting to hear that, you know, you want to prioritize partnerships, but I think we're also hearing about strategic partnerships. And I'm glad you were able to join us here, and hopefully we can really, you know, the researchers recommended that British Council acts as kind of like this facilitator, and, you know, to provide this platform wherein philanthropists can connect and network. So we're really hoping that, you know, with the other speakers here, maybe there could be, you know, future partnerships that could be developed after this talk. Yeah, so thanks for that. We'll move on now to Mr. Chito Sobrepeña. Hi, Chito.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank the British Council for commissioning this landmark report, Arts and Culture Philanthropy in the Philippines, truly a landmark one. We also congratulate the Art Fair Philippines for organizing this specific art talk inside the mind of an art patron. And special thanks to Dindin for featuring the story of Metrobank Foundation as one of the respondents, and for Lisa and Lai for inviting me to be a panel discussant. Having said that, my reaction to this report will be drawn from my full-time work as president of a corporate foundation whose flagship program is a long-running annual recognition of exemplary works in painting and sculpture. I would like to begin my reaction to the report by focusing on the recommendations. I welcome the recommendations stated in the report, particularly number 1 on the matter of lobbying for the passage of legislation to promote and support the creative industries in the Philippines. Coming from a financial institution, putting the work of visual arts in the context of a creative economy, I welcome this idea of coming out with the legislation providing a framework, both policy incentives and general promotion among all the sectors of society. So the report mentions this, and I think that us in the art community should support the work of that progressive bloc headed by Congressman De Venecia. The second one is on the matter of development of a program, especially in the senior high school level. There is already an arts and culture track in senior high school in the revised curriculum in the Philippines, for the information of Jack. But the recommendation focuses on having a special module on financing art and culture. So aside from developing overall awareness of the contribution of arts in nation building, there can be modules in the curriculum on how to mobilize support at the community level, whether supporting individual artists and workers or providing financial assistance through mass-based fundraising or crowdsourcing. The third recommendation, which I support fully, is the development of a dynamic research culture, specifically for giving for the arts. Giving for the arts. The challenges and pain points, which was adequately reported in the report of Dindin and Alain, this can be the starting points of a research agenda. We can call out those pain points, challenges, and put that in a research agenda, which can be supported by a third-party funder, maybe through JAC and Output, or the British Council. So, in sum, I fully support these recommendations to the British Council, consistent with its mission of linking Filipinos and British nationals in joint activities in arts, culture, and philanthropy. I also would like to react to the comment of Kim-Davies regarding that the sustainability aspect should be that the philanthropy should have a longer view. And as I will be sharing now in terms of what we are doing in Metrobank Foundation in the Philippines, we would like to say that this concept of a longer view towards art philanthropy has been with us since we started in 1984. I have a few slides here. Metrobank Foundation's brand of practice of philanthropy in the arts is anchored in its organizational nature of being a social development organization. It is our firm belief that arts and culture is an important pillar in nation building alongside our other institutional priorities, which are also mentioned in the report: education, health, livelihood, and public service. With this institutional lens, we view our programs in a developmental perspective. This way, our programs and interventions are sustainable and creates tangible impact on the lives of our target audience. Our brand of philanthropic practice is anchored on recognition. For 38 years now, we have been recognizing and discovering artistic excellence in the Filipino youth through the Metrobank Art and Design Excellence. The late chairman, Dr. George T., being both an art collector and a philanthropist, had the vision to provide a program to engage the young people in 1984. As you would know, 1984 was a turbulent year in the Philippines as Aquino, our hero, was assassinated. And so we had our first Metrobank painting competition. Dr. T's personal mission to provide the avenue for the youth and to encourage them further to pursue a career in the arts led to the establishment of our annual program. Being the art collector and banker that he is, he believes in investing in the potential of the youth and the importance of culture in building the nation. His example shows how one person's vision become institutionalized, and this in turn magnified the impact of his mission as a patron of the arts. As noted in the report, personal values very important. In a graduate thesis conducted in 2020, the impact of MAID's recognition framework yields different kinds of value exchange. Value, as defined by Bourdieu, can be in the form of economic, social, and cultural capital. For a recognition program such as MAID, at the onset, economic value is given in the form of our cash prize, being one of the biggest for upcoming artists in the country. Our grand awardees receive 500,000 pesos or 7,253 sterling pounds. Special citation receive 100,000 pesos or 1,450 pounds. And so on and so forth. A total average of 2 million pesos or 29,000 sterling pounds are given to our chosen awardees every year. Another form of value bestowed upon the winners is also the social capital through multimedia exposure, introduction to patrons who are bank clients, and other members of the art world. Lastly, the cultural value laden in the institutional affiliation, as well as the reputation of the award, because we have been giving this for 37 years already, attributes to the awardees. All of these are part of the unique recognition program that awards provide as a form of philanthropic intervention. This I want to highlight in this forum, that awards and recognition is an important part of philanthropic intervention as far as the Philippines is concerned. 10 years after the inception of our first competition, our foundation then established a complementary or a parallel intervention through grant giving. Under this framework, we're able to support the realization of the objective to launch the careers through the provision of financial assistance to our winners. Through our grants program, we enable them to help and empower art organizations whose programs are aligned with our strategic framework for the arts. We provide a strategic framework called IDEA, Inspiration, Skills Development, Enhanced Exposure and Application. We are able to do our advocacies as long as this aligns with our institutional roadmap. From this strategic direction, another evolution happened in 2017 when our chairman decided to increase the economic incentive from 350,000 to 500,000 pesos each, ensuring the strategic sustainable intervention for young artists. We now have provided opportunities for them to either take their masters in art studies, fund them when they want to go to Art Biennale, and to provide them grants to develop their studios or their art spaces. Our program also expanded to include art education interventions, alumni engagement, because we organize all our winners since 1984 and ask them to pay it forward, and for our arts collection management. As part of the fulfillment of our mission to support arts as part of social progress, our art education support and nourishes an audience that is aware, appreciative, and engaged in the arts. Nourishing further the potential of our former awardees, a community of creatives through our network of winners, this creates larger ripples of impact for the larger society. And by the way, Jack, Leroy New is one of our awardees. And lastly, our art collection serves as our contribution, not just for the institutional legacy of our patron, but also our contribution to Philippine art history, covering almost 4 decades of Philippine contemporary art. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for that, Chito. I really like what you said about the value of recognition, as a from one of the ways in which you kind of bring access to your funds, basically, with adding social and cultural value and then translating to economic value in the lives of artists. So that's really interesting to hear in terms of also of how you monitor your impact. That's always a big question for organizations like the British Council also. How do we communicate the impact of our work? So I might just go back to that slide and learn from you there. Okay, so last but not the least, we have Katya Guerrero, who is a visual artist herself, a practitioner, but she also co-founded Luz Luminda Photography. Hi, Katya.
Being part of this research was very interesting for me because I was able to compare myself to the other participants who are way more established, very institutional. So I find I can learn a lot. I took a lot of notes from them. At the same time, I also realized how my approach is different because I'm coming from an artist point of view. So just a few notes regarding some of the pointers I noted about the other participants. For example, I really appreciated or loved the idea of Jam Akusar, the BAP Young Collectors Circle. I find that's a great idea and it could be easily replicated. So I think in general, for us to move forward, I think we can take ideas from each institution and just replicate it. Specifically, the Young Collector Circle is important because you're cultivating younger collectors. And in my case, there are no collectors in photography. And that's one of my major concerns. Right now, there's a lot of hesitance towards photography. And frankly speaking, it's very, very problematic. Another thing that I would like to note is the institutions that set up libraries. Libraries are very, very important. Actually, I'm noting this down because I also initiated a bookstore promoting Philippine art and culture. And Filipino books are very, very expensive. And we have noticed a great interest in books since we opened the bookstore, but it's not sufficient for us. And the market is still very selective. So libraries are very, very important. So of course, there are specialized libraries such as the Lopez Library, but there are other specialized libraries such as Quintin Pastrana's initiative. But I feel there's also a need to create a middle ground where it's more for the general public. Just a basic observation, we have many co-working spaces. It became fashionable 5 years ago or something. There's tons of them. And I don't understand why any of these co-working spaces could be developed further to become full-blown libraries. So perhaps a partnership with co-working spaces to develop more community-based libraries inside cities would be a great idea. Another thing I would like to note is about the creative economies. The creative economies, I know it was pushed by the British Council also, it's a great idea. And I would like to note how in the study, they mentioned that many of the philanthropies are supporting visual arts and are supporting basically collection-based, acquiring artworks, everything. But I would like to note that not all visual artists are full-time artists, or not all artists are full-time artists, even by choice. Many artists need to have other jobs to survive. So obviously you have to, that would be a statistical issue to see how many artists are actually full-time artists. But my basic statement is many visual artists or many artists in general can contribute more greatly to society and should be integrated into the social fabric. Another example that brought this up was the project of Jam Akusar, where she invited Christoph Wodisco to explore Bataan province and explore the idea of art, tourism, and history, for example. That's in my opinion, artists can be instrumental, can work with industries to develop design, can work with industries. Tourism can be artist-driven. As I said before, it's important for neighborhoods to have art and culture within them, and thus the importance of cultural maps. Something as basic as a map of different cultural initiatives is very helpful in promotion. So lastly, another thing that I noticed was the idea of membership. It was brought up as a model for sustainability. I still believe, there are patrons that have the capital to support the arts, but these are few, really very few. So in my personal opinion, I think there should be an effort to create or to generate a campaign to promote memberships that will draw in a wider audience, because we really need to generate more audiences. And maybe that could be also a joint effort among the different philanthropists or cultural spaces in the Philippines. So I really look forward that this research will motivate people with cultural spaces to work closer together, and perhaps also bring in partnerships. So basically, that's my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Katya. Yeah, lots of great ideas there, in terms of co-working spaces, partnering with libraries. I guess also as a response to COVID-19, actually a lot of the co-working spaces, they had to, either stop operations or close down. So I think that could be something to consider as they recover, and partner with libraries or other cultural activities actually. And your suggestion on mapping or having maps, I think that's very beneficial to, in terms of the cultural assets of a city, discovering the cultural assets of a city, bringing in more audiences to a city. But I would even like make that, widen that initiative into basically, you talked about libraries. I think catalogs in libraries is equally important. I think we have many books. I'm not sure how much we know about these books. I think there's a lot to do there. And of course on memberships, in terms of bringing in more patrons who don't necessarily give a lot, but give in number, right? In big numbers. I hope I understood that comment.
Yes,
correct.
yes, correct.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So thanks for that. We're actually gonna move into our open discussion. I have a lot of questions for all of you, but I wanted to start with something very personal, and ask each one. I know that some of you approach philanthropy from a professional perspective, meaning it's your role right now. Some of you, of course, founded it, but I wanted to ask, how would you describe the satisfaction that you get by supporting the arts and cultural sector? The personal satisfaction that you get. Maybe we can start with Katya, actually.
Like Gigo Alumpay said, it's never boring. It's always fun. Every day is a new experience. So I love engaging with different people, and that's what I say. Come over, engage, ask all the questions you want. And I believe it's not only about financial support. It's actually about sharing resources, and that's really number one. And someone that's very responsive, approachable, responsiveness. That's very important.
Yeah. Sadie, would you like to go next?
For me, I think this is my most fulfilling role. And as I comment, one of my last comments was that it's passion, purpose, and commitment. And it's a space where, business, advocacy, and passion converge. So that in itself tells you all. It's fulfilling in so many aspects.
Yeah,
that's it. Thank you.
Sorry, did you say my name? Hi.
Yes,
I
hi,
would, and then there was the pause. Yeah, for me, I really see, I see our role really as also storytellers. So we're really helping a group of patrons come together and then kind of see their philanthropy in action. So once they've gone through a process of deciding where to award the grants, or even researching new areas or organizations that are applying for funding, we also organize, for example, trips around the world, when new hubs or pockets of culture really expanding, for example, even like LA, where art fairs are really booming over the last 3 years. Or even in the Philippines, really reaching out, visiting, Bay artists and seeing jam artists, like being able to take patrons beyond just where they might naturally go, if they were to visit the Philippines on their own, but to really push the research agenda, see the storytelling. And for me, that gives me the greatest satisfaction is really it's seeing the impact of what you're doing, and through that we create just this amazing program throughout the year of really engaging and touching with the projects. but otherwise you just wouldn't. I think that is what really sustains the giving for us. You know, you really see what's happened next after you've awarded that grant.
Yeah, yeah. There's a very strong emotional aspect to giving, right? As we've seen in the report, but also as you shared for today. And that can be, I guess, further strengthened through storytelling, through great storytelling. Chito, hi, what do you think?
Yeah, I am inspired all the time when I see 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds, young artists submitting their artworks to us. And despite the pandemic, for example, they continued to submit the artworks for evaluation and competition. I as a development worker, I delight in seeing over the years our competition capturing the emotions of young people. What is important to them, they transform it into their artwork. Whether it was the Mount Pinatubo eruption, whether it was the execution of a worker in Singapore, the pandemic nowadays, I delight in seeing all of these emotions, these thoughts of young people being captured in the canvas. So that gives me specific joy, and being able to help provide for them. I interview these artists and I ask them, what will you do with your cash prize? That will finance my education. It will help repair our houses. So both the humanitarian aspect as well as the institutionalization of what is happening in our country, because we have been doing it for 4 decades, delights me as a development worker.
I think, and if I could respond to Chito as well, I think it's also, it's not just the seeing the artist, but it's also how the artists help us navigate these, you know, or especially political and humanitarian issues that we're all trying to process. I think that really came to light during the pandemic as well. You know, suddenly we're all locked down and just seeing the most incredible art even being made online, and just how moved, you know, we all were, you know, now suddenly confined to working in our bedrooms, but we're seeing these incredible artists coming forward and creating performances from their balcony and sharing even things like memes online, which were just so creative. And I think it just really helps us navigate just some really turbulent times.
Yeah. Sari, did you want to say something?
No, I was just agreeing with Jack.
Yeah. Actually, I wanted to bring in Dindin and Alain as well, in case they wanted to add some comments. So yeah, welcome back to the panel discussion, by the way. Hi. So because Dindin and Alain, you've also been contributing in your own ways, right? So please feel free to share your comments also during the discussion. I wanted to ask about the idea of artist grants. So giving grants to artists, because I think this was mentioned in different ways throughout the report and in the discussion so far. So, you know, Dindin and Alain, they recommended, you know, that maybe organizations can offer grant writing workshops, you know, to help organizations and artists apply and have successful applications for these grant programs. I wanted to ask, well, first of all, like, what do you think about, are they important? Are artist grants important? Artist grants important? And what are the challenges that you face? I guess this is more targeted to the institutions who give grants. What are the challenges when you give grants? Would like to answer this first.
I could take a stab at it. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. I think for us at Lopez, because the art always has to be grounded in you know, some sort of connection to our collection, whether it's historical, it's intellectual, and all that. So finding the right artist to be able to do that, but the research is grounded. I'm sorry, the grant is grounded in research in the archives?
In our case, it is related to our awardees. Since we open our competition to 18-year-olds to 35. So these are very young artists, less than 30s. So we want to help them launch their careers. So anything that is related for them to push forward, to have their first solo exhibition, for them to go abroad and participate when they get invited to international exhibitions, that's where we welcome grants, proposals. And then we make it a point to make it very simple. So just a letter, and just explain to us where they would like to use the money for. Of course, our grants are not large or huge. It's just to help the gallery to which they will be holding their first solo exhibit, provide logistics. But right now we're looking at art residencies. And if we will be working with British Council, Alliance Francaise, and others, then they will have to write grants. And maybe that's where moving up in terms of preparing proposals for international grant makers, maybe that's where the value of training them or hand-holding them will come in.
I'd like to share two examples with regards to grants giving and grants application. The first is that last year, for Art Fair Philippines, Don Paparom shifted their art competition program into a grant program for art residency. So we've been able to partner up with 5 groups around the country. One is the Manila Observatory in Quezon City through the Ateneo de Manila University. Another is Linangan Arts Residency in Cavite, which is led by Manny Garibay. Another one is Emerging Islands in La Union, spearheaded by David Loran and Hannah Reyes Morales, who is a photographer. And another residency is with Orange Projects in Negros Occidental. And then we also have one in Palawan with Barrio Butanding. So it also came, I guess, at the right timing because we were encouraging, well, many artists wanted to leave their homes or their studios, and it allowed them to go elsewhere to expand their practice and then maybe meet new people to be able to discuss their ideas. And also nice to get out during the time of the pandemic. So that's worked out well. We were able to facilitate that. And Don Paparom is coming in for a second year. So we're having a second edition for 2022. And then another example of grant giving is I'm currently with the National Commission for the Culture and the Arts, the Visual Arts Committee. We normally have a 3-year term, and every year we are supposed to disburse grants in the amount of 5 to 7 million. So if you add it up, now that's about 15 million to 21 million pesos worth of grants. Now it's become very problematic because they have very strict compliancy guidelines. No, you have to be accredited by the NCCA. You're supposed to show them 3 years worth of financial statements. You cannot be a corporation. You have to be an NGO or an LGU. And then, of course, liquidating is a very tedious process. No, so we're actually not able to distribute all that money on a yearly basis. In fact, for last year, we were only able to disburse half of the amount, no? And then so half of that amount, so the other half went back to the NCCA. So what we did this year was that the committee came up with committee-initiated projects, meaning we will take care of implementing the project on our own. While it's a good idea, the basic idea really of the NCCA grant system is to be able to give it to the artistic community. So we're not supposed to be, so ideally we're not supposed to be delegating, implementing any projects at the committee level. No? So, we are planning on April 22 to have a a presentation on how to help organizations and individuals with the accreditation process, no? But but despite that, I think really the stumbling block is being able to present like 3 years worth of financial statements, no? And the other problem is that NCCA has their own timeline for working, and oftentimes the organizations have to forfeit the money because they're not able to do the project in time. So it falls through the cracks. It's happened a few times over the last 2 years. So hopefully, I don't know. Well, we've brought this up to the NCCA board several times, just to give them feedback from the artists community. Thank you.
I wanted to share about the role of training and education, perhaps knowledge circulation for artists vis-a-vis, let's say, academic institutions, because the practical side of the things like writing a grant, let's say marketing your work, establishing a portfolio, actually aren't taught, let's say, at fine arts programs. No? So I think this is something that we could also look into when Dindin and I mentioned about establishing strong education programs. And part of the reasons for this is actually the frameworks available for schools or for academic programs, because these are actually not required for schools to teach. So in a way, I think there should be an intervention that could happen, maybe across partnerships between schools and nonprofit organizations in this context.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's actually one of our big considerations every time we have a grant program at the British Council. We want to make sure that, of course, people apply. I mean, we want artists and organizations to be successful, and if we can contribute to the quality of, to increasing the quality of proposals, then yeah, we're all in to do that. We've recently initiated some briefing sessions, for people who are interested in applying for grants, and I think that's really helped a lot. But I wanted to hear from Katya in terms of, from an artist's perspective, how important are grants to you?
I think grants, yeah. Grants are very, very important, but I think we just have to realize how an artist survives. And it starts with the schooling, as Alain mentioned. We're not given the skills to really function in regular society, okay, particularly for freelancers. So, there's a particular language, some business skills, paperworks, how to register. Although I personally had a little bit, I have a corporation, but it took me a while to understand business and how to run and operate something. But for artist organizations, it's very tricky because artists obviously also do their own personal things, and then they have to figure out how to work together. Many artist organizations do not last. And unfortunately, sometimes the registration process is so tedious. I don't really know how to make it easier, but it should also be easier because government registration is super tedious, and the filing of taxes is also tedious. So yes, but grants are important, but I think we should look at the bigger picture when we look at grants. Now, it has to be a combination of government support, private support, and then just empowering the artists to have ways to sustain themselves. Not always asking for money, because that's also not a good, you don't feel well if you're always asking for money. So you have to have like a livelihood initiatives for artists to make their own money, even if they're not selling their art.
I'd like to share, maybe in terms of how to access grants. I remember many, many years ago when I was an intern, I interned in the Smithsonian Institution's Development Office and the sponsored projects office. No, what both offices had were they had like a computer that had a database that listed all of the grants that you could find internationally. So like so that was one, no? So anytime they had to raise money for a particular project or let's say an exhibition, uh, they would write they would know exactly what these foundations or organizations funded, whether it was from, let's say, the private sector or the government sector. So it was very easy to access that. No? So I don't know if that's one thing that we can do here in the Philippines is, I don't, maybe we can find a way to, maybe as an initial effort, just to find a way to list all of that and find a way to upload all that information, so it becomes like a one-stop shop for information. And then maybe another part would be like how to write a grant application. So basic, basics.
Mm.
Yeah.
Jack, did you want to add to that? I know that Outset gives a lot of grants.
Yeah, absolutely. But we don't necessarily support artists directly. So we do run a residency and look at exchange. And we also do help artists in the sense of helping on studio infrastructure. And ensuring they know, especially during things like the pandemic, making sure that they had the legal expertise as well to know their rights, if they were still being made to pay rent when they can access the studio, things like that. But we really believe that it's through funding organizations that really has the biggest impact in terms of offering resources as well to artists and getting that out to the widest possible audience. Working with, certainly even the British Council are very good as well at getting those resources out there. But you mentioned as well just offering organizations offering the skills to artists. Well, we'd probably be funding that organization rather than offering the kind of direct expertise to the artists. We're very much kind of led by what institutions, museums, galleries, complexes are looking for. And because directly ourselves, we don't engage so much with like marketing and that side of things. We really just fund the organizations to do what they do best.
Yeah, it's very interesting. There's that's also an approach of the British Council now. Funding organizations who can then help the artists more directly through the grant. Okay, so I wanted to ask you all about philanthropic circles or networks, because I think in the report this was mentioned. The importance of being part of these networks, whether informal or formal. And I think Sadi, you're part of a philanthropic network, right? AVPN. I just wanted to ask, how does this work, and how do you think this kind of benefits your philanthropic work?
It's very rewarding in the sense that it opens you up to a whole world of opportunities, whether they're grants, whether they're connections, like-minded institutions that you can collaborate with. It's quite important for you to go out and network, so that you're able to increase the exposure of your institution and bring in fresh perspectives as well.
Outset is also a philanthropic network. Jack, how does that work, Jack?
Yeah, so I would agree. I think networks are just so incredibly important, and between our kind of 9 franchise organizations, we're constantly, it's all about skill sharing our insights, really looking at are we seeing similarities, and especially the relationship with patrons. Are they wanting to fund the same things? We're having some really interesting moments right now with a lot of what's going on in the world, and I think actually Chito talked about this earlier. It's the power also of art to really engage in humanitarian projects, which you perhaps, it makes us question suddenly, from 20 years ago when we were started, which was very much to create a fund maybe to help collections expand and buy art and make amazing exhibitions happen. Well, now we're also looking at funding safe houses for artists, and in what role really is an arts charity in at what point does maybe a humanitarian charity maybe take over where their expertise are? But certainly we're seeing, projects coming out of like Myanmar, what's our role right now with Ukraine, and having some really impactful conversations. So in order to start approaching discussions like this, it really is about exchange and seeing insights from, how are my colleagues in Estonia feeling right now compared to how we are in London. So it's really quite interesting. Really what I would say is that around knowledge sharing is the most important thing for me in terms of networks. But there's an element for Outset that we aren't part of a big wider network because we're so independent. And I think there's something very good about being independent in a way, because with not receiving government funding or public funds, we can be a bit more risk takers, but we can actually make the decision. Actually, we will fund that project that touches on kind of being a humanitarian aid thing. So I like the idea that we can remain independent, remain risk taking, but I really would push the agenda that we continue to share resources as widely as possible. And even research reports like this are just such a perfect way of being able to feed back and show some really tangible data of what people are feeling right now.
Chito, you wanted to add to that?
Yes, I like to support your recommendation or your view that we need to have networking. Maybe this group of 75 could be the core of that network led by British Council. Just to pinpoint, during the time of the pandemic, we were trying to think, how can we help the visual arts during the pandemic? We did not have any network to go to consult, etc. So what we did was to develop on our own. We allocated 1 million pesos, for example, and Alain and my Metrobank team recommended that, sir, why don't we give ayuda or assistance to all of those artists who was supposed to have a one-man show or an art exhibit, but because of the lockdown, the restriction on mobility, canceled their shows. So they had expected income arising from that show that has been canceled. And so we started with identifying all our previous awardees, but later on, since there were our awardees who said, no, you help the others other than us, so we expanded it to any artist. So we were able to give ayudas of 10,000 pesos each to all of those who applied. As long as we finished the budget, we were able to give it out. So that's an example, very small example of art for humanitarian purposes. But then again, we could have shared it or got inputs from like-minded organizations. Thank you.
The NCCA also gave money not to the artists, but it was 5,000 pesos. For the Visual Arts Committee, we were able to distribute that 5,000 pesos to about 974 artists all over the country. So we do have a database that we can work with if needed. No? That can that would be a resource, an additional resource.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Maybe, this is how networks begin, right? It's through the first connections. And I like the idea of connecting with partners internationally to kind of try to see your advocacy from a different perspective. Because based on the report, a lot of projects are very local. So I think, having that international connection allows you to see the impact that you're making from, I guess, a wider perspective, from a global perspective. And I think that can only strengthen how you develop your programs in the future. But it kind of makes the idea of the impact of the arts more universal. It's not just this local community that can benefit from it, but if you connect with artists internationally, you might just be inspiring another art community altogether from a different part of the world. So thanks for all your insights. We actually are moving on to the Q&A because we are kind of over time, but they say that we can extend 5 more minutes. So I just wanted to share some comments from the floor. There's a comment here on grants. So they say feedback on rejected grant applications would be helpful from our end as artists. Maybe institutions can dedicate time and resource for this. I think, yes, this is feedback on your proposal. Will obviously make, help develop, proposal in the future. And then we have a question here. Most residency opportunities are located abroad. Could the philanthropic cultural tourism among the international councils, such as UK, US, France, Germany, Japan, be combined to help administer the database of grant and residency opportunities that Dindin and Araneta described, including how to apply for them? Thinking of artists, creatives outside Manila who are not fluent in language or have the facility. I think, well, I can answer this as part of the British Council. I think this is, we've had some cooperations in the past, with Japan. There's an annual silent film festival that actually is organized, among, different international cultural institutions. But in terms of like building the database of opportunities, I think, yeah, hopefully we can make that happen. We definitely be interested to include that. But I guess just to follow up on this question, how do you make sure that access to these opportunities is very inclusive? How do you make sure that your programs reach your targeted audiences, especially if they're not in Manila or they're speaking a different language? Maybe that can be our closing question, actually. Who would like to answer that first?
Well, for me, I would, I would consider creating, all I'm saying, it has to be translated in the various languages. I mean, if those publicity materials should be in all those different languages, addressing the different types of communities, and for flexibility, I think it's important also.
Would like, Sadie, would you like to answer that? How do you ensure access to your opportunities?
Yeah, I'd like to answer this from the perspective of Artefino. No, with Artefino, we actively go out and look for designer-led communities that have the greatest potential. Although, of course, we do have a lot of requirements. Now we have to see how sustainable the community is, how the leadership is, and how they respond, to the grant. But it's important for us to go out of Manila, and well, if we do Davao one day, then we do Cebu another for another round a year or two after. Yeah, well, it's a conscious effort.
Chito?
Because of our alumni network, we have identified really groups in the Philippines where there's a concentration of our awardees. For example, like in Iloilo, we have so many winners from the Western Visayas region. And so that's where we can concentrate. We would welcome proposals coming from the group of artists in Iloilo for some collaborative project. We even worked out something with what's mentioned by Dindin's report, the Ilomoca, the Iloilo Museum for Contemporary Arts. So this is something very new to us, but it's something that we are open and looking forward to doing more in the future.
And finally, Jack, would you like to have the last words?
Oh, that's very kind, Lai. I would say it is the most difficult question that you've put to us, because as well, speaking as a funder in the UK, I've also just personally done like one research trip to the Philippines, which was incredibly enlightening, and so I have a sense as well of all the incredible organizations that we could fit within that kind of curated program. But there's also, in terms of being as inclusive as possible, well, I'm very reliant on even like the network within the group right now, the research that gets published. You know, I very much only see how we can fund through the lens of hopefully experts and those sharing knowledge, but I'm ultimately not on the ground. So really the most important thing for me, I think, is also champions of the region. And when we're going through our decision-making process, for example, I mentioned Mercedes Zobel is one of our partners. So she's actively there at the table, you know, with her team, helping inform discussion. We're incredibly conscious of, you know, language barriers and how we can be the most inclusive and accessible to our grants program. And realistically, there's people around the table that haven't funded anything in the Philippines before, are hearing about things like the Orange Project and things like that for the first time. So it's really reliant, I think, globally on having champions in different regions that can really advocate for where funding is most vitally needed. We have to be kind of led through research and incredible publications like what's been launched today.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this afternoon. So I just wanted to thank all of you for all your insights and your valuable input. We have the research, but you know, it's nothing without feedback from the community. So I'm really grateful, and thanks for Art for Philippines for inviting us to share it in their platform. We're gonna have a photo op apparently with our group. So please give us your best Sunday pose. And hi, just let us know, Danny.
Yes, hello everyone. So are you ready? 3, 2, 1, smile. One more, please. 3, 2, 1, smile. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope you saw the link to the report. Sorry, go ahead, Sheila.
No, I was saying, let's have a photo of all the hardworking people at the backstage.
With Danny and Therese.
Yes, and Alain.
Yeah.
Alain. Okay, shall we do another one?
Okay. Yeah. Carissa and Danny.
Thank you, ladies. Great work.
Nice to see all your faces.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, smile. Another one. 3, 2, 1, smile. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Therese, maybe you can invite them to the next talk when we close the conversation. Yeah.
And thanks again, everyone, for joining this afternoon session. We really appreciate it. And again, we'd like to thank the British Council and, of course, this year's education partners, the Ateneo Art Gallery, Museum Foundation of the Philippines, and the Spanish Embassy to the Philippines. Now, we would like to invite you later tonight. We will have our third session, The World According to Nune, a discussion on the life and work of Nune Lucio Alvarado. This is at 7 p.m. Please visit our website to register for all of our online events at the show. Thank you.